Welcome to another episode. What are you reading? What are you writing? A weekly video podcast features creatives, writers, and readers, and we come together to talk about books. I am your host, Karen E. Osborne, author of 4 novels and counting. I am so glad you're here. I think you're going to enjoy our next guest. You know how every week, and I know you probably watch me every week, I hope so, that I interview a new author. A lot of times I've not read their book, but today I've had the pleasure of reading Susan E. Sage's new book, Silver Lady. Hey, Susan.
Hey there, Karen. Thank you so much for having me on your show today, and thank you for reading my book.
Oh, you're most well. Thank you for the privilege of getting an early copy. I really appreciated that. So, the book is this is Susan's publication day, December 17th. Yay! Congratulations.
Thank you.
And and this book is called the genre is called magical realism. And I have to be honest, I didn't know that that was a genre. I didn't know anything about it. So maybe our audience doesn't know anything about it either, Susan. So could you just explain what magical realism is?
I can do my best here. Let's see. As I understand it, Karen, magic realism stories are based in the real world, but what they have added to them is a dose of magic, either a small dose or a big dose, meaning that a lot of magic is thrown into the narrative or just a little. It can be uh, a lot like fantasy, but what differentiates it from fantasy is that it takes place in the real world, where, a fantasy is not that way at all. Magical realism has elements of fantasy in settings, characterizations, situations, but then the two kind of part ways.
Yes. And one of the things that you mentioned to me when we were off camera
Uh-huh.
was a couple of examples of famous authors who write in
Oh,
this genre.
That's right. Thank you, Karen, for mentioning that. The author who popularized it in Latin America was Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who wrote 100 Years of Solitude. And I read that novel years and years ago, and it always, you know how some books just stay with you. And that one was one of them for me. Also, Isabel Allende, who is still
Mm.
living and a wonderful author today, and if I can pronounce his name correctly, Jorge Luis Borges, a poet and magical realist author too. In our country, though, Alice Hoffman is probably
Mm.
one of the foremost magic realist writers. And it's interesting, I just learned this the other day that women authors seem to gravitate toward the genre. So I find that curious.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah, that's cool. So
Mhm.
when you were thinking about the Silver Lady, when you were thinking about the book, you could have written it in different genres. Right?
Right.
You could have, but how did you decide that this is why? What
Uh,
was the pull to
okay.
magical realism?
The pull was that I didn't want it to be a dystopian novel that was bleak. I wanted more than anything to show how art, poetry, music, how all of that can add a beauty to life, to our lives, no matter what kind of awfulness is going on in the external world. So I'll tell you in a little bit about my main character, but she's very driven to do exactly that. So there's some definite symbolism. It's more protopian than dystopian, if it makes sense.
I love that. I love that description. So tell us the premise of the book.
Okay. The premise is that it's slightly in the future in 2033. The USA is quickly devolving into the DSA, the Disunited States of America. And it won't be long before all the states are their separate countries, have become separate countries. It's post-pandemic time, but not the COVID-19 pandemic that we have known, but one, it's called the Strangler virus. And it was far worse than what we experienced. And people kind of, went into seclusion for until the virus was over, and it has been over for about 3 years when the story begins. Um, the main character, protagonist Cassie, is a retired teacher, a doula, and a widow. She's a little younger than I am, but let's just say in the same decade. And she needs a vacation, as many people who have endured this awful pandemic certainly do. So she sees an ad in a paper about taking for the need of someone to drive a luxury houseboat from Minnesota down to New Orleans, down the Great River. I don't call it the Mississippi, but it's implied, and anybody who knows that route will know it's the Mississippi. Anyhow, Cassie has got a grown daughter who is an architect by trade, and Cassie's daughter is one of those holdouts who refuses to come out of seclusion. Um, in part, Cassie takes this trip because she wants to be a role model for her grown daughter to show her that life can still be an adventure, right? You
Yeah,
still
yes, yes. And it
makes
is an
sense.
adventure. And it's such a an interesting premise. It's such a unusual premise. So what do you love about Cassie? Now she
Ah,
wants to inspire her daughter, but what are some of the other characteristics that you really love about her?
well, she's a risk taker. She's earnest. Above all else, she's very earnest in what she does. She longs for friendships with the five other crew members, two other couples and a teenager, whom she takes the trip, who go with her on the trip. They're her crew. Um, and she wants to be a role model for her daughter, like I indicated. She also wants romance, but she wants
Mm,
independence in her life at this point. So I
yeah,
guess that's about it for her positive. She's um, definitely a flawed character too, in that
yeah, I like
she
what?
does well, she gets a little too earnest. She every time a boat is passing at one point in the story, she yells out "Ship ahoy!" And with it's a large boat, but it's not like a huge boat. It's not that big. So she starts to annoy the other passengers or crew members on the boat with her "Ship ahoy!" every time she passes someone. And she takes her job as captain a little too seriously at times. The book is written in a captain log format, so she
Mhm.
thinks of herself kind of as a journalist of the boat, and she tries a little too hard, maybe to be objective. When you're taking this trip down the Mississippi, how can you possibly be, right? Um, so those are Cassie's, like, it's like you can see why.
Yes, yes, the things that she has to work on, right? So
Exactly.
people are always curious. I don't always ask this question, but I ask
Uh-huh.
it often enough about how long it takes, to write a novel. And I know for everybody the journey is different. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your journey. And
Ah.
did you have to do a lot of research? Did you kind of what was that journey like, and about how much time did it take?
Well, with luckily with this novel and the novel that preceded this one, Dancing in the Ring, um, I was able to write both novels being retired, so I haven't had outside employment. Because of that, this book and the one before took about 2.5 years each to write. Before
Mm.
that, when I was working, my first novel, I think we've written this. I'm working on novel number 5. And my first, that's what I thought. We're both kind of in the same
Same
sort of
place.
a um, I don't know about you, but my first novel took me over 7 years because I was only able to work on it in the summertime and weekends. So I never thought I was going to finish that one. And even the second novel took over 4 years. So Silver Lady took me probably around 2. And unlike Dancing in the Ring, which was historical fiction, I didn't do as much research. I certainly researched Mississippi, some titles that I was gravitating toward that I was interested in, but not nearly the amount that I did for my historical fiction.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is so much, same with me. True Grace was my first historical fiction novel, and I was just amazed at how much research one has to do because you want to get every detail right. But then when you're writing that's not historical fiction, it's not as much research. Yeah. Yeah, my first one took forever because I didn't know what I was doing.
oh, the same. Yep. Um,
So this is number, so Silver Lady is number 4?
4. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And are you working on number 5?
I am. I'm about halfway through a very rough draft, and I'm actually writing the sequel. The first is Silver Lady Goes Downriver, and the sequel, she'll be going back upriver. And the Civil War is over, and she's headed back. So it's fun, but it's a lot more. Have you written a sequel, Kieran? It's a lot more daunting than I thought it would be.
So interesting. Our careers are so parallel. So
Oh,
my fifth novel comes out. I finished my fifth novel and it's coming out in March.
oh,
But the one that
congratulations.
I'm writing now, the next one, is a sequel. And you're right. I
Oh,
had to reread, first of all, the whole
yeah.
book because I
Oh,
wrote it so long ago, that it's a sequel to. And then you have to do so much of getting back into those characters'
yes.
minds, and they have to still be true to who they were. And yeah, it's kind of interesting though, isn't it? It's
It is
challenging.
interesting. Any tips you want to pass along, you have my email. So thank
And
you.
same here,
All
same
right.
here. I appreciate that. So, um, as you mentioned some authors earlier in this
Mhm.
conversation, but are there any other authors that you've read that have just a huge impact on your
Oh,
overall writing life?
oh, oh, there sure are. Let me think here, Karen. I'm gonna name a few. I've been a fiction reader ever since I was a girl. So to try to make a quick summary of it, to name a few, Margaret Atwood. I'm a big
Mm.
fan of her work. Toni Morrison, love Toni's work. Joyce Carol Oates. You notice I'm naming mostly women authors. Amor Toll. I love Amor Toll. And Amor is a male. And Marquez, like I mentioned earlier, he was huge. Let me think if I can think of others. Oh, Virginia Woolf, her stream of consciousness novels,
Mm,
especially.
mm.
Not all of Virginia's, but I've always been intrigued by stream of consciousness
Yeah,
writing.
which is such takes such skill,
I,
to not lose your audience while it's a really unique style. Yes, absolutely. Have you read anything recently that you could recommend to our audience?
oh, I have, and I love this book. I think it was published within the last year, and the name of it is James by Percival
Yes,
Everett. Have you read it?
yes, yes.
Wasn't it wonderful?
Wonderful, wonderful book. Yeah.
Ah, I can't speak highly enough of that book. I loved what he did with how he ran with the character of Jim, and just
From the
the code switching was. marvelous. I'm so impressed with that.
Yeah,
Um,
from the Jim from Huckleberry Finn.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that it was really so it's I think it's up for a Booker Prize. I think it's
I
one of the
believe so.
finalists
Yeah.
for the Booker Prize. Yeah, that was a great book. We both recommend it to you. So Susan, now that you've got some new followers, new people who are very interested in you, interested in your books, want to know how how they can get a hold of Silver Lady, how they can be in touch with you. What's the best way for the audience to find you?
Well, probably I through my website there's a place where they can just write me and it goes to my email and that is susansage.net. And I all the links to my books. I showed a copy, right, of Silver
Oh, we
Lady.
didn't. Yes.
I meant
Thank you
to.
for reminding me. Look how beautiful. No, no, hold it up again
Oops.
so they can see how beautiful it is. Look at that cover. Yes, yes. So if you so it's not Susan E. Sage, which is what you write under. Your website is susansage.net.
Correct. That's
Okay.
right. That's right. Also, I'm more recently on Blue Sky, just under Susan Sage. That is gaining a lot of traction these
Yeah.
days. So it's kind of a fun time to be on that platform. Also on Facebook, though, my author page is one of my books was called A Mentor and Her Muse. So it's mentorandhermuse.com for my author page. And I'm also on Instagram under Susan Sage or Xana Sage, which the the you might people might not remember that. So maybe my website is the best.
The best place. And then you can find all the links and that could take you to the various other social media. That sounds great. Well, I hope all of you have enjoyed meeting Susan. And I hope that you are following me on my author page and on Instagram. I'm on Instagram too. And I just joined Blue Sky, so I have to see how that turns out. I don't know if you're doing that. I sort of gave up X and decided to jump onto to Blue Sky. So when you do get in touch with Susan, when you do go to her website, when you do buy her books, please let her know that you met her on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Until next time, everybody, thank you so much for being with us. Bye bye.